And we are joined by, who would like to go first? Mr. Adam Gray?
I'm Adam Gray. As you can see, just there. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm one of the regulars on this show.
What's caught me off guard, actually, is I was expecting Jeff to be in the green room when we started.
I just popped up to say surprise. Hello.
So let me start off by introducing Jeff, because he's going to be a new face for everyone. So Jeff is. I'm very excited about this topic today because mental health in sales is a topic that's close to my heart, and I particularly like some of the research that Jeff has done last year. So without further ado, Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so my name's Jeff. I'm the founder of Sales Health Alliance, which is a company entirely focused on the mental performance side of sales. So it starts by helping leaders identify how things like stress and burnout, negative thinking, how that's impacting their team's mental performance. And then once we get a landscape of what's happening within the team, it's working with them and their teams to upskill in areas around things like mindset and stress management, how to effectively build resilience and make work more meaningful, to really drive higher performance through better mental health and resilience and all that good stuff. So cool. I can get into how I started my story a little later, but that's essentially what I'm up to and what Sales Health Alliance is focused on.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it. And Rob.
Hi, all. I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, and I am really excited to be a part of this conversation today. This is something that strikes home for many people, so I'm looking forward to the discussion and hopefully being able to help.
Andy.
Sorry, I think I'm in the wrong call. I'm from procurement, and Andy, founder of the Institute of Sales Professionals and lecturer in sales leadership and performance at Cranfield University. And I'm really fascinated about this, as we try to do some stuff to help the well-being of salespeople. I think it's exceptionally impertinent. I don't know, Jeff, if you saw Gartner's statistics that they sent out today, but it isn't looking good if you're in sales and you want to have any shred of mental kind of stability. And I know I've been there. I'm probably still there as well. So really looking forward to this.
Yeah. So some of the stats I wanted to kind of pull out, before Jeff tells us a little bit more about his backstory. 79% of salespeople are stressed or highly stressed, according to the research Jeff and his team did in 2022. 63% of salespeople are suffering with poor mental health, and 60% of sales leadership are suffering with poor mental health. And so today we're discussing, why are we getting it wrong? A lot is happening in society that sales leaders are overlooking, and the path is broken. So what needs to change so that salespeople can enjoy their jobs again? So I'm really looking forward to that bit of the discussion. But before we get into it, Jeff, do you want to tell us a bit more about your backstory and why Sales Health Alliance?
Yeah, totally. So I am a former sales leader myself. So the way I like to describe it, there was like sort of two genesis moments throughout my career that sort of led to Sales Health Alliance. First one being when I first started in sales about 13 years ago. It was sort of the classic boiler room type of sales environment, $200 a day, 2.5 hours of talk time. You weren't hitting your metrics, you let go very quickly. So very much this sink or swim type of sales environment. And on the surface, I did really well from an individual contributor level, but behind the scenes, I struggled immensely with anxiety, insomnia. I'd get these really nasty panic attacks in the middle of the night. So it was after the third panic attack that put me in the hospital when sort of Genesis 1 happened. And going to therapy 13 years ago was still highly stigmatized. I tried anxiety medication and I didn't like how it made me feel. So I sort of went down this path of self-growth to learn everything that I possibly could around mental health, stress, and what are other professionals inside sales and outside sales doing to manage the pressure of their jobs and navigate the emotional ups and downs, because there's so much to love about sales, the learning, the growth, the camaraderie, the money that you can make. So that's when I sort of really had this passion start to unfold, and I started learning everything I possibly could, and didn't really share it with anyone over the next sort of couple of years as I went down my own path. And then Genesis 2 happened in July of 2018. I just launched my first sales consulting website, and I was ready to be entrepreneur life and ready to set off sail. And 3 days after I launched the website, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. So life threw this like crazy curveball that I wasn't ready for, but that was the experience when I realized the same strategies I was using to take care of my mental health and sales, I naturally executed on during this next stressful period of life. And as I sort of got better and went through the recovery, it just became clear, like, who can I help? Who can I serve? And it really became clear that anxiety in sales is not optional. It's really part of everyday life. And when teams become anxious and stressed and burnt out, their performance really starts to suffer. So how do we change the lens on this topic to really think of sellers as these corporate athletes and working with leaders in their teams to upskill in these areas which are neglected and overlooked consistently?
Yeah. May I just make an observation? So
Totally.
I obviously, in what we do, we talk to sales leaders and salespeople a lot. And it means that we get to see the inside track on the reality of working within lots of companies that are very good at PRing their care for their staff. And I was having a call ahead of a meeting with one of the largest of tech companies. And the person that I was talking to said, and we've known each other for some time, and the person I was talking to said that the team that they lead is falling apart. That the people are under incredible pressure. They said, we're renowned as being particularly good payers, so everybody is incredibly well compensated. But the reporting structure, and I thought when I worked with Alex, I thought that the reporting structure and the forecasting schedule that was expected of people in sales was pretty brutal, but nothing compared to this other company. Basically quarter end is every single month as far as they're concerned. And no sooner have you done a forecast and a deal analysis of each of your deals, then you're preparing the next one, which is going to happen 3 or 4 days later. And it's like what hardened sellers would expect to be the behavior at year end, when we're trying to pull those last few straggling deals across the line ahead of closing out the year. And it seems like in this company, it's like that every single day. And this is a company that's very well known for giving people time off to do their charitable stuff. And, we're having wellness days and all of this kind of stuff. And actually, the reality is very different from that. And I think that one of the challenges is that sales, I was going to say is invariably a brutal job to do. And lots of organizations want all of the glory and the feel-good feeling of saying, we really look after our staff and we give them all of these extra benefits outside and beyond what we have to do, all of these well-being things. But the reality is that many of these organizations are still in the dark ages in terms of how they see salespeople as like a commodity that can be strip mined until it's used up and then discarded. And it's just horrendous to hear this, absolutely horrendous in this day and age.
Yeah, and I think part of that is like, I think that's how my view really started, as like for a very long time I looked at these sales organizations or these sales leaders and founders who are trying to build these companies. I'm like, initially my perspective was, this is horrible. How do you treat people like this? You're the enemy. And I think the longer I've gone down this path over the past couple of years, it's shifted to being really compassionate and empathetic towards leaders and founders and anyone trying to build a company, because it's not easy and it's really difficult. And I think it's less of, evil existing and people like intentionally doing this, and more of a just overall lack of education and a need for upskilling in both leaders and individuals to manage the difficulties of their jobs. I think like wellness days is a perfect example where it's like the easy thing to do, but there's sort of like three primary things that are wrong with wellness days in general. It's a reactive strategy. So you're saying like people are burnt out, let's give them time off. So the problem has already been addressed. Two, you're assuming that everyone in your team and everyone in your organization has the skill set to effectively rest and recover and use that wellness day effectively. And three, you're also assuming that everyone on your team or everyone in your organization is going to be motivated to do things that are kind of boring, like some self-care, some meditation, walking outside, versus spending that day off playing video games, drinking wine in the park, like engaging in binging Netflix, engaging in behaviors that are not going to actually help them come back rested and recovered the next day. So it's been interesting to see my perspective of this, to your point, this like horrible blaming you to like, oh, like it's just really tough and there's just such a gap in knowledge. Like, how do we focus on that piece to really be more compassionate and empathetic to what's actually going on from a leader standpoint?
In my experience, the benefits that you're talking about, wellness days and vacation time, unlimited PTO, those aren't built with the sales team in mind. Those are built organizationally. And then each department is supposed to execute as it fits into their ability to serve the business. And it doesn't serve the sales part of the business at all. Sales is the only department I've ever worked in where I constantly felt like I had homework. I constantly felt the pressure to achieve quota. And even if I hit quota halfway into the given period, the expectation that was that I would continue to exceed that quota. There was never an off switch. And I don't think accounting goes home with, oh, I really have to put those debits and those credits in the right columns tomorrow.
And I think you're speaking a lot to what Adam talked about too, where it's like, if you think about the forecasting and the way targets are being set, a lot of companies are working off of this like monthly target or this quarterly target. They may do some annual planning, but not really. And if you're in that consistent reactive state of like setting these targets each and every month, there's no way to factor in things like quota relief. So offering quota relief to reps who are on vacation to say, yeah, like you aren't going, your commission check isn't going to be impacted when you take time off. We want you to take time off. Like if you think about every other high performance industry, whether that's sports, and anything that requires performance, there's always an off season because it gives that person and that athlete the opportunity to rest and recover. And that's not happening within sales. It's like you hit your target, you maybe get a weekend off or like, you know, a few days off if it's a long weekend, but then you're back at it. And even if you go on vacation, you're dealing with things like guilt or you're checking your email and you can never really shut off because that quota is still hanging over your head and is going to be impacting your performance. So structurally, there's so many different ways and things that we can think about within sales to help address this, to ensure rest and recovery, and essentially an off season can be built in.
Yeah. I think now might be a good time for me just to plug your book for you there, Jeff. Stress less,
please.
Sell,
Please. Yeah.
and sell more, because there's a little story in here. If sales leaders coach, are you a basketball fan, by the way?
Huge basketball fan. I think my claim to sort of fame is I played against Steph Curry in grade 8 and he absolutely destroyed my team. So yeah, huge basketball fan.
Nice. So page, well, it's January, month is January, number 15 of 220 things or ways to prioritize well-being. So if sales leaders coach LeBron James, like most manage their salespeople, their interaction might look something like this. So here's how it goes. Sales leader, we're on a 6-game winning streak consecutive quarters hit in brackets. We need to keep crushing our opponents. LeBron, sure, coach. Sales leader, LeBron, instead of getting 30 points and 10 rebounds like the last game, I need you to get 40 points and 15 rebounds this game, in brackets, metrics. LeBron, why, coach? We need more fans. Our sold out stadiums aren't enough to make us happy, in brackets, rat race. LeBron, coach, I can try, but I'm feeling a little burnt out from that road trip and back-to-back games, in brackets, hard previous quarters. Sales leader, burnt out, really? Here are some new basketball shoes. They'll make you run faster, in brackets, sales technology. Let me teach you a better way to shoot so it's easier to score, in brackets, sales training. LeBron, coach, I think I just need some rest. Maybe manage my minutes, in brackets, lower my metrics in the next game so I can rest and not get hurt. Sales leader, no, we need to win this game, in brackets, hit sales target. Didn't you hear me? We need to crush it or the world will end.
Well, we've got some great comments in. Perhaps Alex, you might like to address this one. Given that it is your wife.
Let's say we've had, let's say for many years I put work before family, and on the rare occasion we would go on a family holiday, I would often be searching for Wi-Fi in the hotel lobby rather than sitting by the pool. But I saw the error of my ways, and actually had suffered from depression and burnout before. And it's, when you kind of experience that, you start making decisions that sort of take care of yourself, your body and your mind, and prioritize that. And one of the things is spending time with family to recover and enjoy that time, so that you can perform.
I think it's a really interesting point, Jeff, that you make. There's a few leaders in life that I've come across that have battled a lot of stuff, but then actually had the courage to take a stance. And I was very lucky to sit down for dinner twice with Jack Welch. He used to run GE.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me, this is very early on, it's like my third job or something like that, and in sales. And he said to me, so what's your work-life balance? And I said, I'll run through brick walls and work in 10 o'clock at night. I'm there for you, Jack. This is it. I am GE through and through. And he went, got any family? And I went, well, yeah, a young family. And he went, how much time do you spend with them? Well, not a lot, because I'm totally work focused. He said, you're going to learn a lesson in life, and that lesson is you're going to leave a company by your choice or by their choice. And after 3 months, people are going to struggle to remember what the hell you did. And you went, but the time you spend with your family, the virtues and the values that they actually get from you will go on for decades and generations.
So true.
And it's true. And I left a company by my own choice, but I was having I got up one day and just thought, I can't look myself in the mirror and go into work and do the board meeting on Monday. Just couldn't do it anymore. And within 3 months, nobody called.
Yeah. It's one of those things. And I think we see it, if you were to die tomorrow, that recruiting and that hiring would be full swing a few days after that. It's important to keep things in perspective, but it also touches on one of the dumbest things that sales companies do that it drives me absolutely mental is how at the end of a quarter or the end of a month, they just reset the scoreboard. Everything goes away. You're back at zero. You're back at zero. You're back at zero. And I'm not saying that you can't sort of reset and start over. You need to keep lifetime revenue visible. That is an incredibly important anchor point for a seller to have to your point, that Andy, when you do end up leaving, it's saying, well, shit, I don't know what I did when I was here, versus I'm leaving and I'm walking away knowing that I sold over $500,000 for this company. That's like, I made an impact on their bottom line. And I think about all the customers that I helped. And two, when you do inevitably miss your target at some point, it's easier to say, yes, I missed, but you then have a different anchor point for your attention to say, but look at what I did over the last 6 months or the last year and a half. Like I'm capable. I believe in myself. Like the fact and the proof is right there, versus back to zero. I'm like really bad. Like, it's just like, what, like, why do we do that? It makes zero sense.
The bit, and I'd be interested in Rob's viewpoint, because it's a bit of an Americanism, but I was teaching at Cranfield the other day, some sales directors, and they actually said something to me that made me literally cry, which I thought was dead, which is this promotion of your superstar salesperson to a sales manager and what fail.
Yeah.
You go, yeah, they're awful. They're absolutely shocking. Well, hang on a minute. They were the best thing since sliced bread when they were sales reps. So we did nothing to support them, nothing to prepare them. I just threw them over the line, and we categorized them as shit. And you go, and that's got to be something we've got to address, surely, Jeff, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's someone wrote about that today, Alex Newman, how it's just like we train these people and these top performers on like how to sell effectively, and then we say, hey, here's a new role where you're responsible for the people and the lives of others. It requires an entirely different skill set, and we're not even going to train you, but good luck, you're going to figure it out. Like, it's so silly. And there's so many other sort of data points out there that go back and show that frontline manager and that relationship that an individual has with their manager is the most important driver of how long someone spends at a company and how well, they perform and relate to others. It's critical, and we just don't provide any training. We'd rather say, well, let's do more negotiation training or discovery training. It's like, we got that. We're good. Like the other side of this, the mental piece, the stress piece, the relationship piece, connection piece, that is where we're struggling right now as an industry.
I wanted to bring up the question that Dr. Dale Childs had posted. First, he says, such an important topic. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'm intrigued to understand a bit more about how you feel the sales environment could have been adapted to help you during the time when you were struggling.
Yeah, so I was lucky because I had a really good mentor manager at the time that really helped with sort of that difficult period. His name is Ryan Austin. And I think the most important thing that a leader can do is provide more safety instead of less safety when someone's pacing behind, because so often we think the answer to performance is to put them on a PIP or risk job security, to say if you don't do X, this really bad thing is going to happen. And the problem with that is, if you think about a stress curve which goes like this, and on this side you have 79% of sellers that are highly stressed. So what we want to do is we want to get them back to this middle piece, the optimal performance zone. If they're here because stress is impacting their performance and we're saying, do X or you're going to get fired, that's moving them further down into this corner where they're unable to perform. Like that motivational push that, do X and or Y is going to happen. That works sometimes when people are not feeling stressed, where they're sluggish, where they're unmotivated. Like that's down here, which will help motivate them into this high performance. So, but if that person is already really overwhelmed, really struggling, like it's absolutely critical to provide more safety and approach this challenge and this rep that's struggling with compassion and empathy and curiosity to say, well, what if it isn't related to sales training? Maybe this person isn't lazy, and maybe this person is actually a good fit and they just need some help. Like, what are some of the other things that could be happening? Well, maybe it's sleep, maybe it's something's happening in their personal life. Maybe they just lost a deal that they're having trouble managing the internal chatter in their head. I think one of the best sort of perspectives I had was with one of my clients. Their leadership mission was to be the best stop in a person's career and the most memorable stop in a person's career. So their approach was, whenever this person leaves, as long as they're here, we want to make sure it is the best experience that they have in their 40 or 50-year career. And when you approach it like that, all of a sudden you start to include other things like, well, maybe PIPs aren't the best approach. Maybe we should consider things like health and well-being more effectively. And that shift from a leadership perspective changes how you approach these individual conversations on a regular basis.
So I heard you say leaders provide safety. And for me, the critical distinction there is leaders provide safety. Managers think they provide motivation. There's a significant difference between managing and leading. And I don't think enough weight is given to that distinction, especially as somebody matriculates into that manager of others for the first time versus the individual contributor role they've always known.
Yeah. But to your point, Rob, as well, like I think that goes back to why it's so important for leaders to take good care of themselves, because if that leader is operating in distress, so if we think about this curve and they're down here in a state of distress where they're anxious, where they're worried, the part of their brain that's online for empathy, curiosity, compassion, that's offline. They're in a fight or flight, and they're saying, like, I just need to protect myself. Like, I don't care what happens to this person, get them out. Like, that's the problem. Like, leaders have a critical role. That's why leadership is so hard, is because not only do you have to be sort of aware of everyone else on your team, you absolutely have to be taking good care of yourself to ensure that you're showing up in a place where you can be compassionate, you can make good decisions, which often isn't the case if they're maybe getting squeezed by executive leadership or other things that are happening in their life. So it's, again, there's so many nuances to this topic, but I don't know how often this conversation that we're having today just never takes place in terms of
and that's the issue, isn't it? The issue is that this isn't spoken about. And I think that one of the other things is that this comment from Andrew, do many companies promote wellness policies but are they only applicable to a certain few within the company? So again, you tend to see that there are certain individuals within an organization that are aware of the facilities and programs that are available, and also feel empowered to take those facilities and programs. Because if you're the guy that's out here on the end of the stress curve, and there's a program for you to take a bit of quota relief and a week off to go and get your head straight again, if you're out here stressed, that's the last thing you're going to do, isn't it? Like poor Alex when he's on holiday. You're on holiday to unplug. So what's the very one thing you don't do? Unplug, because you're concerned about the impact that'll have. Now, it's worth saying, Alex, for you, you've got a lovely wife and lovely kids, so it hasn't worked out too badly for them. But it could have done, couldn't it?
I think there's, and Emmanuel's got a great comment here. Hi, Emmanuel, hope you well. There's two great books that two Harvard professors wrote. Jeff, I'm sure you probably know them. So there's Amy C. Edmondson, who wrote the book The Fearless Organization, and talks all about psychological safety. And there's actually an 8-point assessment in there. And actually, most organizations aren't psychologically safe, which therefore makes it virtually impossible for you to actually have any kind of caring and well-being and anything else. And then there's the other one by Sean Aker, which is the happiness principle. And this concept, particularly in sales, which is that actually success drives happiness. And Aker grabbed that and he went, no, that's just wrong. It's the same wrong as in 1754, the Austrian astronomer basically found out that actually the sun didn't revolve around the earth. Actually, the earth revolved around the sun. And unfortunately, it took him 100 years for everyone else to catch on to that. And it's probably going to take us a few years for everyone to catch on to the concept of, you know what, beating the crap out of salespeople is probably a very antiquated way of doing things. And looking at different metrics of how you might actually motivate people. And actually, to your point, Adam, I don't think a week off works. I think we've got to think about things more long term, really delve into how do you create an environment for people to be psychologically safe, for people to be vulnerable. And I don't know about you, I don't know about Rob, the US Army, but there's a hell of a lot you can learn from the armed services about leadership, because they are so vulnerable now. They just sit there and go, I'm a general, I don't have the answer. I'm not the guy that's charging the machine gun post in Iraq, so I'm going to ask some questions of the people around me. And yet CEOs and senior leaders go, I'm paid the big bucks, so I must have the answer. So I'm just going to impose it on everybody because I know the answer, because that's why I'm the CEO. And it's like, no, that's got to change as well. How about being vulnerable and going, I don't know.
I think you touched on just very quickly, because you touched on Amy Edmondson's book, which is one of my favorite. And I think it's very relevant to today, because she talks about an acronym called it's called VUCA, and that stands for high volatility, high uncertainty, high complexity, high ambiguity, and why safety is so critical to provide in high VUCA scenarios. And if we think about what's happening in the world today, this VUCA situation, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, we are accelerating at a rate that's never been experienced in human history, where there's these disruptive things that are happening, whether that's global wars, climate change, the rise of AI. There's all of these things that are going to hit sales industry and the workplace in general simultaneously, that we have to we have to prioritize this stuff, because relying on these outdated fear-based management tactics that were used for an assembly line back in the early 1900s, your team you're screwed until you start to identify and say, we have to change our ways with what this new world is bringing in, not in 20 years, in a year. It's here now.
I don't think, though, that, addressing mental health and doing all of the things to prevent that as individuals is one thing, but this idea, and you write about it in your book, this idea of fossil fuel and the Industrial Revolution creating, growing our economy and creating so much value for people around the world, yet it's killing our planet, right? The traditional sales funnel that once worked, but it's damaging businesses because buyer behavior has changed. Salespeople are selling harder. The bottom of the funnel is getting tighter. Surely we need to address. We need a different approach in sales.
But I really like that, and I'd be really interested in Jeff's response to this, because we talk about sellers being very, very stressed, and they are. This isn't a but. I don't agree. But actually, here's a concept: on buying groups is stressed as hell. So if we've talked about Matt Dixon's book, but he professes that actually the fear of failure means that most people in buying scenarios, the other side of the fence, never make a decision because they fear that their signature on the bottom line is going to come back and bite them if something doesn't work in the project, or something doesn't work with the project, the product, etc., and so forth. Yeah. And so actually, isn't this psychological safety dragging companies and this well-being, dragging companies down for both sides of the equation? What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I would agree fully, and I think one of the biggest, one of the best lines I read, I'm gonna butcher it, but it was a book that by Brené Brown that she wrote a couple years ago. I think it's Daring Greatly, but she was talking about in the early 2000s how we had 9/11 happen, we had wars happening, and she was talking about how this period, the way post-traumatic stress, PTSD, shows up at a societal level is through disengagement and a loss of connection and a lot of anger and sort of polarization of beliefs. And she wrote that back in like 2006 or something. And if you think about all of these traumatic events that have happened over the recent time period, that PTSD that we're experiencing at a societal level, it's just getting worse and it's not being addressed. And you think like all of these posts and all this data around how disengaged people are, for sure it's going to impact sellers. For sure it's going to impact every department of an organization. For sure it's going to impact the buyers that we're selling to. It's impacting all of us. And it's like, this conversation isn't limited to just sales, because it's like, to your point, it's affecting everyone. And we're all struggling. And there's a lot of like pandemic fatigue and things that are happening with the changes that are happening that we're all just trying to do our best to get through.
Yeah, to your point.
I like Jason's comment. It also stifles innovation as it causes paralysis in many sales individuals and doesn't give room for reflection and experimentation.
Mm, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the interesting things, and you spoke about putting people on a PIP. Do PIPs actually work? I mean, there will be some individuals where obviously if you whip them harder, they'll run faster. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, I can't imagine that the shame of being placed on a PIP and the stress of being placed on a PIP does anything other than encourage you to pick up the phone to the recruitment consultant and find another job somewhere.
When it gets to that level, though, Adam,
If that's the intent, then it worked.
the decision's usually been made at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, the PIP is not, as stated, improvement. The PIP is cover. Hey, we tried. You can't sue us. We let you go for a cause.
Yeah. But my friend of mine, Stephen DeGroot, he coined this term that I absolutely love when you talk about this. He describes that sort of piece as like a PIP, for example, as a moral betrayal, where there's this idea when you start working for a company and you start, your leader's there to support you and there to help you and train you. And when you defer to something so harsh as a PIP, it's such a moral betrayal. And again, it's pushing that person. It makes that person feel as an outcast of their tribe. And I think you're right, Rob. A lot of it is to, cover the company's
You can
asses.
say it.
Yeah, cover the company's asses so they don't get sued. And it's like, why do we go through this, like, this really like this song and dance, which doesn't help anyone, versus like really having an honest conversation and say, well, okay, let's check the rep first. Like, are they like, where are they at from a mental health standpoint? What's their stress levels at? And then actually have a conversation around fit. Like, people don't want to show up to a company where they're in a bad fit every single day. So let's have a conversation about that. And if it's not a right fit, that's okay, but let's talk about it. And then as a leader, rather than worrying about managing someone on a PIP, why don't you say, well, like, let's invest that time into helping this person find a new role where they will be a fit. Like, that's a way more productive conversation and a healthier way to approach it versus this like song and dance where people are worried about getting sued. And it's just like, it's okay. It's not a fit. Like, let me help you.
Yeah.
When I had to put somebody on a PIP, as was dictated to me, I sat them down and gave them two choices. We can work on sales training techniques, and I can help you, coach you in that way. Or we can work on your resume. Which is going to be a better benefit to you? But at least at that point, they were making the decision as to whether or not the role was right for them, and then moving forward accordingly.
I love that. I love that approach. It helps empower that person to make a decision too. Like, it's like it puts the ball in their court to say, like, and again, you position yourself as someone that's there to support them regardless of what decision they make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to Andy's point, about this conundrum that we're in between seller and buyer. And I know you talk about this in the book, Jeff, a VP sales enablement of well-being. And one of the line items is creating processes that is, supporting the customer, essentially. I didn't quite get the full wording, but I think about that, and I think about, well, what are the steps? What are the behaviors? What are the activities? What's that guiding light, that pathway that we can create for sellers, for salespeople, not just sellers, sales, marketing, and customer success, that actually map to what the buyer is experiencing, and geared towards helping the buyer through that journey. So you bring buyer and seller together in a more symbiotic way.
Mm-hmm. So I haven't looked too much at that. I think like Brandon Fluardi, he has a lot of great content around that approach specifically of how do you really approach the conversation as this transformational process of helping them see, A to B, but position yourself as a guide. Again, I can't speak to it as well as he can, but he's sold some pretty incredible 7-figure deals where he's done this approach to really address and approach that conversation with a totally new insights and new perspectives that the company isn't even thinking about, that really helps you be invited into the conversation versus this conversation that typically happens when buyers and sellers don't really trust each other. And there's like, I know you're trying to sell me, like, stop doing that, versus, hey, here's this new way of looking at it, and why don't we look at it together from this perspective and see if that makes sense.
I think Neil Rackham summed it up, and this is going back to 1974, isn't it? When he said, "There's 19 salespeople will sell you a ladder when you've fallen down a hole." That's what people want. The 20th person that goes, "But before you do anything, there's a hole over there, and what I'm going to help you with is how you're going to avoid that hole." And we don't do enough of that. And that's credential selling, but it's insight selling, and we don't have salespeople that connect to the C-suite and say, "Here's the issue that's coming. It's applicable to your industry. It's applicable to your region." And I think that's partly because the Internet of Everything thought that was going to provide all the solutions, isn't it? So the smile that Neil Rackham looked at was everything's either going to be super transactional or super consultative. And actually, it didn't work out like that because the Internet of Everything just confused everybody and got them all.
Isn't the issue primarily that people are still compensated on that quarter by quarter or month by month basis? So you're down a hole. It's all very well that I'm going to show you a map of how to get out of your hole, but actually I can take some money off you today by selling you a ladder to get you out and solve that immediate problem. The fact that you're going to have the same problem again.
I'll put you in the hole first.
Sorry?
So I'll put you in the hole first.
Yeah. And that's the problem, isn't it? Because salespeople are compensated, sell any deal today rather than the right deal or the big deal tomorrow in many instances.
Well, that's a fundamental concept of effectively mis-selling driven by shareholder value return.
But many organisations operate under that cloud, don't they?
Well, virtually everyone does, because I can't think of a company, and I welcome anybody to tell me of a company that actually doesn't put its numbers up every year, because it either has private shareholders or it has public shareholders, and they want more. And then henceforth, the only way you get more is if it isn't a blatantly obvious solution that people buy. So it's a pull rather than a push. You need people to convince them why they want it. And henceforth, there comes the stress. It's the oil in the San Andreas fault, isn't it? We want this. They don't necessarily want that. And we're going to make you the lubricant. And that's, I've been there, where not because the company was bad, but because one company didn't understand what the other company really wanted in a partnership. And your job in the field was to make it work every single day. After 12 months, it was like, this is just torture. I'm off. So I think it comes down, and I don't want to make it about pipeline, but we should be discussing about the fundamental is if you've got genuine 3 or 4 times your goal in conversation and pipeline, you don't have this problem because you can afford to take a longer term view.
Yeah.
Big question, big debate. We should come back for it next week on this.
We should.
Get Jeff
back. We had this QR code up before when we were speaking about leadership, but you didn't have a chance to address it. Did you want to let the viewers know what is behind this?
Yeah, and Andy, just for Andy, I think that's a great point. Like having a full pipeline is one of the most effective things you can do to buffer stress, but it's tough to fill that pipeline, especially with what's going on. But no, I think it's a great topic for sure to go over. But in terms of this that is up on the screen right now, so one of the biggest sort of challenges that I've identified is, again, going back to this perspective that sales leaders, executives, they aren't these evil people that are intentionally trying to, do these nasty things to sellers. And most of them actually genuinely care and they want to help out their teams. But right now, they're so overwhelmed. They're so stretched. Budgets are being cut. They're being asked to do with more with less, that they truly do care about their team, but they have no idea where to start or how to help their team. So I've created a free mental performance assessment that I've put together that will help take a snapshot of a sales team. I'll work with the leader afterwards. It includes a 1-hour call together where we benchmark this performance or benchmark this assessment against all of the surveys that I've done over the past couple of years to identify where are the best starting points to help support your team in terms of offloading stress and getting their mental performance back on track. Is it boundaries related? Is it they no longer believe in the product? Is there lack of career pathing? Maybe it's sleep. There's all of these different windows and entry points that leaders have access to, but the vast majority have no idea where to start because we're relying on these NPS surveys or these pulse surveys or the engagement surveys. They don't really tell us anything meaningful. So the assessment's a really great tool to take a snapshot of a sales team or a sales organization to really identify where is the best place and what are the major blockers to mental performance that are creating stress, and then spending an hour together where we chat through what you as the leader, as leaders and leadership team can be doing to address these problem areas.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jeff. And we are out of time. 47 minutes. I think we may have even been cut off from LinkedIn at this point. But Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. Incredibly insightful. I'd love to have you back again. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience. If you're still listening, some great comments. Manuel, Jason, Matt, Dr. Dale, Evelyn, Jackie, Andrew. Too many to mention. Until next week, enjoy the rest of your week, folks.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.